Welcome back to another episode of Train for Life Fitness Podcast.
Glad to be here for another deep dive.
You know, if you want to guarantee that you will eventually, completely quit working out, just go ahead and set a rigid weight loss goal for an upcoming wedding or a beach vacation.
Yeah, which I know sounds completely backward to everything we usually hear.
Right. I mean, we are constantly taught to set specific time-bound targets for our health.
Exactly. But neurologically speaking, tying your physical well-being to a hard deadline is it's the absolute fastest way to trigger a massive, spectacular relapse the second that clock hits zero.
It really is. So for today's deep dive, we are tearing into this really fascinating guide. It's titled, Make Fitness Who You Are, Not Just a Goal.
And it's built around this philosophy called Let's Roar, which is super interesting.
Yeah, it features these really striking lion logos and a lot of imagery that focuses heavily on what real, everyday fitness actually looks like for you.
Not just, the polished magazine covers.
Exactly. So our mission today is to deconstruct this text and uncover exactly why we're all so exhausted from constantly starting over.
And more importantly, how shifting from a temporary goal to a permanent identity is like the actual biological secret to lasting change.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to understand how to build lasting fitness, we first have to examine why that goal mindset is so fundamentally flawed for long-term health.
Right. The source text draws a really sharp line here. It compares the desire to just lose a few pounds with the decision to adopt an identity mindset.
Which means choosing to actually be a strong, healthy person.
Exactly. It's a fundamental shift in how you view yourself.
It kind of makes me think about learning a language, Treating fitness like a goal is, it's like cramming vocabulary for a high school Spanish test.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. You aggressively memorize the words, you pass the exam on Friday, and then by the following Tuesday, you can barely remember how to order a coffee.
Yeah, because you didn't actually integrate it.
Exactly. But adopting the identity of a fit person is like physically moving to Spain and just immersing yourself.
You don't cram anymore.
No, you just speak the language because it is your new default mode of existence.
This raises an important question, though, about the biology of it all, because that distinction between cramming and immersion gets right to the neurological root of the problem.
How so?
Well, we have to look at how the brain processes external pressure. When you rely on an external event, like fitting into a tailored suit or a dress.
Which we've all done.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But when you do that, your motivation is entirely dependent on that looming deadline.
Right.
And you are essentially forcing your nervous system to operate in a mild state of physiological threat.
Wait, a threat? Like a literal fight-or-flight response just because I want to look good in my vacation photos?
Yeah. I mean, in a diluted, chronic way, yes.
Wow. Okay.
Your brain perceives this deadline that requires a drastic change in behavior. So it marshals cortisol, adrenaline, and just massive amounts of cognitive focus to meet that deadline.
Okay, so you're running hot, basically.
Exactly. But you have to remember that the human brain is an incredibly ruthless energy conservation machine.
It wants to be lazy.
Right.
Yes.
So the absolute second that wedding or vacation is over, the external pressure completely vanishes.
The deadline is gone.
And your brain registers that the threat has passed. So its immediate biological response is to shut down that high energy operation.
Oh, wow. So it actively works against you.
It reverts to your baseline behaviors just to save calories and cognitive load.
I see the logic there, I really do. But I have to play devil's advocate for a second.
Roll for it.
External goals do actually work sometimes. Like people routinely drop 20 pounds for a high school reunion, or they train for months to finish a marathon.
Sure, they do.
You can't just say deadlines don't produce results. Right?
Oh, they definitely produce short-term results, but at an entirely unsustainable cost.
Because of the energy drain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you are chasing a deadline, you are basically white-knuckling your way to the finish line using raw willpower.
And willpower runs out.
It is a highly exhaustible resource. The moment the goal is achieved, the willpower evaporates. And that leads directly to that infamous yo-yo effect we all hate.
Right, where you gain back all the weight plus 5 pounds.
Yeah. However, when you integrate health into your core self-image, when you fully adopt the identity mindset, you aren't reacting to a deadline anymore.
You're not burning up that precious cognitive fuel.
Exactly. You are simply acting in accordance with who you fundamentally believe you are.
And I guess acting in alignment with your true identity requires almost zero active willpower.
Barely any at all, yeah.
So if shifting to this identity mindset is the ultimate destination, the obvious question is, how do we actually bridge that gap?
That's the tricky part, right?
Yeah, because waking up one morning, looking in the mirror, and suddenly declaring, I am a fitness lion, when you haven't worked out in 3 years, well, that sounds like a massive, totally unrealistic leap.
It does. But the source material argues that this shift has to start from the inside out.
Specifically focusing on our internal dialogue, right?
Yes. It points out that if you walk around telling yourself or your friends, I'm just not a gym person.
Which people say all the time.
All the time. But when you say that, you are essentially writing the code for your own failure.
You're actively programming your brain to avoid movement.
Because words form the scaffolding of our reality. Cognitive psychology tells us that our internal narrative dictates our external actions.
So how does the guide suggest we fix that?
By deliberately reframing that narrative. Instead of viewing exercise as like a punishment for a bad meal.
Like I ate a donut, now I have to go run on the treadmill.
Exactly. Instead of that, you shift to saying, I move daily because it helps me feel strong.
Oh, I like that. It transitions the narrative from a place of restriction and obligation to a place of empowerment.
And self-care, yeah. But that internal dialogue only works if it is anchored to tangible reality.
Which brings us to the micro-routines that this document heavily emphasizes.
Yes, the micro-routines are crucial.
Because we aren't talking about suddenly adopting a grueling 2-hour daily bodybuilding split here.
No, not at all.
The guide uses these beautifully simple examples to build this identity. Things like stretching for exactly 5 minutes after you brush your teeth.
Or just taking a 20-minute walk after work.
Right, or even drinking a full glass of water right after lunch.
Yeah.
There's actually this fantastic 3D illustration in the text.
Oh, the one with the pink sweatband?
Yes. It's a guy wearing a pink sweatband holding dumbbells, but there's this big floating heart next to him.
It's a great visual.
It really perfectly grounds the concept. It shows that fitness is about cardiovascular health and everyday functional movement for you.
It's not necessarily about looking like a fitness model on a magazine cover.
Exactly.
What's fascinating here is that imagery is very intentional.
Yeah.
It deliberately lowers the barrier to entry.
And when the barrier to entry is low, consistency actually becomes possible.
Right.
Here's where I get really interesting, though. And honestly, where I actually want to push back on the text a little bit.
Let's hear it.
So the guide explicitly tells the reader to act like the person you want to be until it feels natural.
Yeah, the classic advice.
But let's be radically honest for a second. If I am completely out of shape, and I do a 5-minute stretch in my living room, telling myself I am a fit person feels like an outright lie.
Sure, it feels uncomfortable.
My brain knows I'm panting and my knees hurt. Isn't this just a classic case of cognitive dissonance?
I can see why you'd think that.
Are we just faking it until we make it and hoping our brains don't, call our bluff?
That is a very common skepticism. But it actually stems from a misunderstanding of how the brain processes evidence.
Okay, correct me then. How does it work?
We have to look at the mechanics of habit building at a neurological level.
Yeah.
The source presents this really profound concept.
A voting concept, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Every single time you follow through on a tiny routine, you are casting a vote for your future self.
Okay.
You're not faking it. In the literal 5-minute window that you are stretching on your living room floor, you are engaging in the exact behavior of a fit person.
But it's only 5 minutes. How does that tiny little window rewire an entire deeply entrenched identity?
Through neuroplasticity and the activation of dopamine reward pathways.
Okay, science words. Break that down for me.
Sure. The brain does not care about the duration of the activity as much as it cares about the repetition and the successful follow-through.
Wait, really? The time doesn't matter as much.
Not for the habit loop itself, no.
Yeah.
When you set an intention to drink a glass of water, and then you actually execute that action, your brain releases a microdose of dopamine.
Oh, so you get a little chemical reward.
Exactly. That dopamine signals to your nervous system, hey, this action was successful, remember this pathway.
It creates a positive feedback loop.
Right. Your brain ultimately believes what it sees you do consistently. The physical action overrides your internal skepticism.
So the identity isn't fake. It is simply under construction.
Yes. And those micro-routines are the bricks you're laying down, one by one.
Okay, I love that. The concept that action generates the evidence the brain needs is incredibly powerful.
It really is.
But let's look at the reality of daily life for a second.
Okay.
Internal beliefs and 5-minute micro habits are a great starting point, sure. But if your physical world is a minefield, that fragile new identity is going to get totally crushed.
Oh, absolutely. Environment is everything.
Right. Like if you are trying to embody this let's roar lion philosophy, but you live in a cage constructed of junk food and lazy triggers.
Yeah, all the dopamine in the world won't save you that.
Exactly. And the source places a massive emphasis on this. It talks about how our physical space completely dictates our mental space.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this brings us to the concept of choice architecture and cognitive friction.
Choice architecture.
Yeah, it's the idea that human beings, by our very evolutionary nature, are wired to take the path of least resistance.
We are fundamentally lazy.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And the text gives very practical advice on how to use this to our advantage.
It does. It talks about keeping your gym clothes visible so you literally trip over them in the morning.
And prepping healthy snacks in clear containers so you grab them without a second thought.
It is all about removing the obstacles before you even have to make a conscious choice, right?
Exactly. Let's use a modern metaphor to explain the mechanics here.
Okay, lay it on me.
Think of your willpower as your smartphone battery.
Okay, I track with that.
You wake up in the morning with 100% charge.
Hopefully, if you slept well.
Right. But every single time you walk into your kitchen and have to actively stare at the cookies on a counter and say no,
Oh man, that's tough.
your prefrontal cortex burns glucose to suppress that urge. You just dropped 5% of your battery.
Just from looking at a cookie.
Just from making the choice to resist it.
Yeah.
Then you open social media and see heavily edited, dramatic before and after pictures that make you feel inadequate.
Which forces you to actively manage your emotional state.
Exactly. Another 10% gone.
Wow.
By 8 o'clock at night, your willpower battery is completely dead. And when the battery dies, your default, easiest behavior takes over.
Which is usually ordering a pizza and sitting on the couch.
Right. But engineering your physical environment is the equivalent of leaving your phone plugged into the wall all day.
Oh, I see. You don't have to rely on the battery because your environment is supplying the power.
Exactly. You are eliminating decision fatigue entirely.
That makes perfect sense. But the text actually takes this a step further, moving from our physical environment into our social environment.
Yes, the social aspect is huge.
There is this vivid illustration in the guide. It shows these kids running a relay race on a bright, sunny track, passing a baton to each other.
It's a really powerful metaphor for community.
It perfectly illustrates that health is actually a team sport. We literally pass the baton of motivation and accountability to the people around us.
Social contagion is a heavily documented psychological phenomenon, you know.
Really? Like catching a cold.
Sort of, yeah. We don't just share germs. We share habits, mindsets, and norms.
That is wild.
From an evolutionary standpoint, human beings naturally mirror the behaviors of their tribe to avoid being ostracized.
Okay, so if your immediate social circle considers like sitting on the couch and ordering takeout every night to be the baseline,
Your brain will subconsciously adapt to that baseline to maintain social harmony and belonging.
wait, so the logical conclusion here is that to get fit, I have to abandon my friends who aren't into fitness.
No. That seems pretty extreme.
And a little lonely, honestly.
Yeah, it's not about abandoning your current relationships. It is about actively curating a parallel fitness tribe to balance the scale.
Oh, a parallel tribe. Okay.
The guide strongly emphasizes the need to surround yourself with a gym community, a coach, or just a specific group of friends who actively value healthy habits.
You need to insert yourself into spaces where the lion lifestyle is just the cultural norm.
Exactly. If everyone around you is already meeting at the walking trail on a Saturday morning instead of the bar,
The healthy choice suddenly becomes the path of least social resistance.
you don't need to exert willpower when conformity works in your favor.
That is such a hack. Okay, so we've got the internal dialogue shifting. We have the environment engineered to eliminate friction,
Check.
and the micro habits are running on autopilot.
Right.
But if we measure our success using the old metrics, we are going to get incredibly impatient and quit long before that new identity fully solidifies into our nervous system.
That's the danger zone right there.
The guide points out that we have to fundamentally change how we measure a win. It advises being proud of your actions, not just the physical results.
Which is exceptionally difficult for most people.
Why is that?
Primarily because action-based results are often invisible in the short term. The human brain suffers from what we call hyperbolic discounting.
Hyperbolic discounting. Okay, what does that mean?
We heavily favor immediate, visible rewards over long-term abstract benefits.
I get it. It is so easy to celebrate when you step on the scale and see that you've dropped 5 pounds. That is a massive visible reward.
Huge dopamine hit, yeah.
But the guide argues that the real foundational power comes from showing up when absolutely nothing big has changed yet.
When it's boring, basically.
Yes. It's about celebrating the fact that you prioritize sleeping 8 hours, or that you chose a nutrient-dense meal over fast food.
And what was your favorite point from that section?
Oh, yeah. My personal favorite point in the whole text is that it celebrates actively saying no to things that do not benefit the journey.
Saying no is the ultimate psychological boundary.
It really is.
It is the protective wall around your fragile new identity. When you decline an invitation that would, say, sabotage your sleep schedule.
You're not just being boring.
No.
Yeah.
You are loudly and clearly signaling to your brain that this new identity is a non-negotiable priority.
And you have to be incredibly patient with that process. Fitness is not a 30-day sprint.
No, it is not.
You are not going to wake up tomorrow morning feeling like a completely different, optimized human being.
And this is where the Let's Roar philosophy really anchors the entire document.
Yes. Throughout the text, you see these bold, aggressive blue and red lion logos.
They represent this core mantra, right?
Once a lion, always a lion.
Love that.
It is about breathing strength, health, and discipline day in and day out. It's an adoption of a permanent way of being in the world.
To synthesize why that permanent mindset is so crucial, you have to realize that true biological and psychological transformation does not happen while you are flexing in the mirror.
It doesn't.
No. It happens in the quiet, invisible, seemingly mundane moments.
The micro moments.
Yeah. It is the split-second decision to drink a glass of water instead of a soda. It is the choice to stretch for 5 minutes instead of mindlessly scrolling on your phone in bed.
And if you only ever celebrate the dramatic drops on the scale, you are mathematically setting yourself up for burnout.
Because physiological changes always plateau. The scale will eventually stop moving.
And if the movement of the scale is your only source of dopamine, the moment it stops...
the habit stops right along with it.
Precisely.
But if the daily action itself becomes the reward...
if you learn to genuinely celebrate the invisible moments...
the feedback loop is immediate, reliable, and constant. The process itself becomes the prize.
When fitness becomes an inextricable part of who you are, rather than just something you do, you never have to start over again.
It completely flips the script on how we approach our well-being.
It really does. So what does this all mean for you as you go about your day? Let's quickly distill the core, actionable takeaways from the Let's Roar guide.
Sounds good.
First, you have to abandon the countdown. Shift from a temporary, goal-oriented mindset to a lifelong, identity-driven mindset.
Second, focus on stacking those tiny micro-routines like the 5-minute stretch and rewrite your internal dialogue to match the actions you're taking.
Third, ruthlessly curate your physical space and your social circle so they pull you forward instead of dragging you backward.
And finally, celebrate the small daily actions rather than waiting for massive physical changes to validate your existence.
My challenge to you today is this. Pick just one tiny, highly specific action from the source material we discussed.
Just one.
Drink a glass of water right after lunch or, put your running shoes visibly by the front door. But when you do it, don't just mindlessly check it off a to-do list.
No, intentionally view it as a vote.
Yes. Say to yourself, this action is undeniable proof of who I am becoming.
And as you think about making that choice today, I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder.
Oh, okay.
We've established that every single action you take is casting a vote for your future self. But what about the people around you?
Oh, that's interesting.
How are the default habits of the people you live with or the coworkers you sit next to subtly casting votes for you?
Without you even realizing it.
Exactly. Studies show that identity is highly contagious. You might be fighting tooth and nail to build the identity of a lion, but if your household is constantly voting for a different animal entirely...
who ultimately wins that election?
Exactly.
Wow. We will definitely let you chew on that one. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, let's roar.